Okay, fall is right around the corner, so now's the perfect time to be discussing pollinator plants and what are some of my favorites to keep those pollinators in general happy well into the fall season. Okay, Labor Day is right around the corner for us, and I always look around at this time of year because a lot of plants that we planted in the spring are getting a little tired. And many of us are trying to take care of pollinator plants and trying to make sure that we're taking care of bees and pollinators in general with our plant selection. But in the end of the day, you want something that's going to look great and something that's going to be low maintenance all season long. And there's this big debate over whether we go natives or just pollinator plants in general. And I appreciate the value of native plants, and I do not want to diminish the value of planting natives in your garden. However, in my experience, a lot of natives, by the time fall gets around, there are a few that come into their own, but perennials in general have a very short blooming period. There are some that will bloom for 6 to 8 weeks or so out of the season. And then there are a lot of them that only bloom for a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I'd say that's average. And so when you're dealing with natives also, they also tend to, in my experience, tend to deal with native diseases and powdery mildew, downy mildew, all sorts of things that make the plant start to look ugly. So yes, the pollinators may love those plants and they have a value. But in my garden and a lot of the customers I deal with, they don't necessarily want a very ugly looking or disease ridden garden just to be able to say it's pollinators or pollinator friendly. So I'm always trying to bridge that gap that says, hey, let's slip the natives in the back of the garden. Let's put them off to the side of the garden, get those natives in there 100%. But let's look at some of the low maintenance perennials and low maintenance annuals that are going to keep those pollinators happy, because it's a long season, and keeping the bees busy all the way to the frost is key in my opinion. So let's take a look at some of my favorites. Now, let's start with some of the perennials. And I believe this may be a version of a native, but this is Agastache Blue Fortune. And this is a great plant. This is a long blooming perennial. This is the second year, so it's getting some height, but by next year, it just keeps filling out. It stands up, but this is probably about a month deep. And by far right now in my garden, the end of August, there are constantly bees all over this plant. And the plant I put down next to it is also a bulletproof hardy perennial. And this is a catmint. It's a proven winners. I believe this is Cat's Meow or Cat's Pajamas. I always forget which one. One is just shorter than the others. But it doesn't look like much right now. But you can see there are a number of little blooms on them. This is such a bulletproof plant. Both of these have been very reliable as far as perennials, especially this one, because this covered in blooms all spring. Hummingbirds were on it, pollinators were on it. It was a great plant for early season color. But once you cut off that first flush, it's been kicking out flowers on and all fall season. Now, clearly the pollinators are loving the Blue Fortune right now even better. But at the same time, both of these are two perennials that are probably my go-to for the longest blooming periods and for keeping those pollinators happy. Now, there's lots of other pollinators. I watched my hosta. The bees were all over them. There's lots of pollinators. Any book you can pick up, and it's going to give you a laundry list of pollinators in the perennial world. But to me, it is now August. A lot of perennials are getting tired. There are some goldenrods and some other plants that are pollinator plants that are good for the fall, and they're going to give you flowering. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're doing a perennial garden. Something's going to bloom in the spring, something's going to bloom in the summer, and then something's going to bloom in the fall. So you want something, if it's only going to bloom for 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to stage the garden so that we have something coming into bloom at any one time. But I love feathering in annuals in order to get constant color all season. And this is where the flower power comes in. Now, I love proven winners, and the reason I love proven winners is not I'm endorsed by them. I just find that they're very reliable, massive blooming, drought tolerant, disease tolerant, and they just seem to perform. And so we're always experimenting, but not all of them are good for pollinators. But I have a few that I've been playing with, and I have to say they're by far my most popular pollinator plants. And let's take a close look at them, because in the spring, many of you skip over them because they're not blooming yet. But once they start blooming, they're nonstop. Now, of course, all of you know my favorite for hummingbirds, but pollinators in general. I constantly have bees coming in here. Just kind of scared most of them away as I walked over to them. But this is my all-time favorite rockin' fuchsia. And the rockin' purple, now it's a little pathetic right now because I got hit with a football a couple times, but it didn't really matter. It broke in half, and then it's still kicking out flowers. And these have been covered in bees pretty steady all season. But I have to say, with my Blue Fortune in bloom over there, the bees are definitely favoring the perennials, but that's going to pass soon, and then they're going to come right back to this rockin' fuchsia. Now, my selections would not be complete if I didn't mention the Vermilion Air. This had a bird bath up here with the top. One of the storms, the bird bath top fell off. The plant fell over, and it is still growing. This is an amazing plant. It's probably my number 2 plant for hummingbirds, but it's just bulletproof. It just flowers nonstop. It's drought tolerant. If it was in the ground, it would be standing up as high as the clematis right now. And I'm not clematis, cleome. But nonstop hummingbirds are on that. So if I'm talking pollinators in general, once in a while I'll see some bees try to work it, but I think the flower's a little bit too narrow and long for them. But I can't not mention them, especially in conjunction with the cleome, because they just do awesome. Okay, sorry for the headphones, they get a little loud around here. But those are some of my favorite selections. That's my mindset, is to feather in some of those perennials. That's what a lot of perennials look like right now. Just green or going dormant or getting disease. So feather in those perennials, pick the right locations, pick the right selection for different times of the year, feather in some annuals to keep that flower power all season long, keep those pollinators happy well into the fall, early winter, and that's it. These suggestions have come from your feedback. We appreciate every time I get suggestions, and all I ask is, what works for you? Tell us and share with us some of your favorite pollinator plants, specifically hummingbirds, because you all know by now, pretty addicted to feeding them. And but let me know real cultivars. So I don't like things you can pick up any book and they say, lantana are great for butterflies and hummingbirds. Okay, well, what cultivars? There's hundreds of varieties of lantana. So which ones in particular are your favorite, if you know the names? If not, just share pictures with us and we'll try to identify them, because that's what I'm going to pull on for trying. Every year we phase out some plants that aren't doing as well in the gardens, and we're always experimenting with something new. You're a biggest source of resource and the biggest source of information. So please share with us what's your favorite, and I hope that helps. Take care.